Worst thing I could do to myself or my family, definitely to my future husband and to God, would be to have sex before marriage.
Everything we heard was about staying pure.
It was simply an expectation due to my faith in God.
We've been thinking about this ever since we did our show about purity culture earlier this year, and we got such a response from people saying, I saw myself in that story, I have a similar experience, I want to hear more about this. And Embodied was born in the middle of a pandemic, and we haven't had an opportunity to gather in community, and we felt like what better option or opportunity to do that than to be in community with people around a topic that people want to be in community around so much. I'm nervous, but I'm excited, and I'm excited to hear all these storytellers. This is Purified, live stories of living through purity culture, presented by Embodied, the Monti, and WUNC. I'm Anita Rao. If I've learned anything in the past year and a half doing Embodied, it is that we are all swimming against currents that encourage us more to disconnect from our bodies than to seek pleasure in them. If you grew up in capital P purity culture, maybe you heard that message straight from the pulpit. Your sexuality is sinful, but you can control it if you follow these steps. If you grew up in lowercase p purity culture, which I and probably the rest of us did, you may have inferred messages about how worthy you were of pleasure from shame-ridden sex education, diet culture, or racism.
I think all of us have specific different kinds of things to say about how we have experienced purity culture, and so I'm really excited to hear everybody else's stories, but I'm really happy to add my own nuance.
Purity culture, both the big P and little p kind, teach us that our bodies are to be controlled, not explored. That it's more important to ignore our wants and needs than to connect with them.
I'm nervous. I don't get to talk a lot about my own personal story, so it'll be interesting to see how this all goes.
So, what if we could write new rules? Ones that centered our right to pleasure. In this body, in this moment, and in every stage our bodies move through. Over the course of the next hour and a half, you are going to meet 5 storytellers who have been working with the incredible Jeff Polish, the executive director of the Monti.
They are here to love you. They are not here for any other reason, but they want to connect, they want to enjoy, they want to be engaged, and they want to relate. They want to see themselves in your stories.
Stories that interrogate their experiences with purity culture and look at how it has shaped their relationships with themselves, their bodies, their sexuality, and their faith.
Did the Peter Piper pick? Tell them about Peter Piper.
Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers.
You're good. Okay, just make sure that you project on here. Now the sofa.
I mean, storytelling is, as an act, it's a gift, and it's not just a gift for the listeners, but it's also quite healing for the storytellers themselves. Just by virtue of the fact that they're sharing and being heard is empowering.
What are you going to have for dinner? Did you make a decision?
I think I'm going to fast.
The listener is sitting in the audience hearing a story that they're connecting to, and they feel perhaps, oh my God, I'm not alone. We're part of the same experience. That is the greatest of moments. Just facilitating moments like that is an honor for me.
This is also being recorded for use in a documentary about purity culture. So if you see cameras rolling around, that is what those cameras are for.
Any last thoughts you want to share before you go up there and tell your story?
No, be nice to me and be gentle. That's all.
So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first storyteller.
I think they're taking us upstairs now.
You can just say hi, we don't have time, I gotta go.
I don't have time, I gotta go.
Break legs, break hearts. Go, go, go. Break purity culture, break shame, hurry.
This is Purified, live stories of living in purity culture.
All right, let's go.
Udofia Udofia is a therapist, consultant, and coach assisting folks navigating spirituality, religious trauma, and healing-centric work. Indhira is a proud human to a cat named Bisa and a lover of bourbon and cigars. And Indhira is also a lover of Marvel and mess. Indhira, welcome to the stage.
So, I was about 9 years old when I realized that I was a problem. It was 1998. Juanita Bynum was talking about no more sheets. T.D. Jakes was saying that women thou art loose. And for the summer of 1998, I was sitting in a rec room learning about the joys of my worth and value, holding a little tiny blue booklet that was styled like a Tide label called True Love Waits. If you don't know, I am not the most delicate or fragile person. I've always been this bombastic. I've always been this shapely. I've always been this rough and tough. I love villains. I love the Cowboys and the Yankees and the Lakers with fervor. So imagine my confusion hearing about what women were supposed to be like and hearing about a love that I didn't understand because I was belching my ABCs and playing footballs with my best friends who were all dudes. So I took in the information as I was supposed to, like a good youth group kid is supposed to do, but I didn't quite connect with the material. I found myself going through the motions, and at the end of the class, my dad kind of looked at me with pity and was like, you know, you don't have to do the ceremony part. And I fervently thanked him because the thought of trying on dresses and picking out a sparkling ring really made me want to vomit. So I took this information and didn't think it was gonna apply to me until I started school and I met Tulip. Now, before you might realize, Tulip is not quite some strong, forceful man that would wrap my imagination. Tulip was one of the coolest, prettiest, smart, edgiest little girls I've ever met in my entire life. I was stressed. I'm talking about, I just wanted to be near her. I knew that she snuck eyeliner in and it was like a crooked cat eye, and I just thought that was so cool. And her lip gloss was super glossy. I just wanted to be near her, and I did not quite understand because these feelings were supposed to happen elsewhere. So I made a decision. I said, maybe it'll kick in later, but maybe if I just keep trying to go down this path, I'll see what all the hype is about. About a couple of weeks later, we are attending Sunday service, and everyone's looking really solemn as our co-teachers for True Love Waits admits to the class that their true love did not wait. They were expecting. And I was very confused because there was no wedding. And I thought, well, if the teacher can't do this, I'm doomed. But like all Nigerian immigrant children, I was like, I'm gonna try my hardest. So I tried. I put my head down. I, did the things that I was supposed to do. I promised my mom I'd wear more skirts. I started to try to catch myself liking people. I even scammed someone into agreeing to be my boyfriend in high school. And so as I went off to college, I didn't think much about Tulip and the stressful part of Tulip, and I moved in my freshman dorm on Dickey Hall, nonetheless, and I then met Iris. And then I became stressed all over again. We were inseparable. We were soulmates. We napped together. I could just disappear in Iris. kind of unfortunate because I definitely had a boyfriend. And as folks started talking about sex, I had to sheepishly admit that I don't know what that's about. To which all of my friends said, when you get home from winter break, when you come back on this campus, you better not tell us that you're still a virgin. So I said, agreed, agreed. That's probably a good idea. So very matter of frank, I would say that I did not follow the purity culture roadmap for my life. And I said, well, if I'm going to fail, let me fail in line with the trajectory. So I said, I'll just ruin this one man's life. So I could tell you that it was magical and intentional, but it wasn't. It started with a fight. It ended with chicken nuggets and a panic attack at Kroger. I remember sobbing uncontrollably as I was confessing my sin to my aunt, who just told me, you just need to take a shower and take a nap. I promise you'll feel better in the morning. And for the most part, I did, but the other parts that I was told from that little blue book just never quite clicked in. That part where I was supposed to feel alive and connected just never quite landed. So I took my villainy from one boyfriend to the next boyfriend to the next boyfriend until I finally said, maybe I'm not doing something right. It wasn't until I had graduated from seminary where I was like, I probably should be honest about myself. I mean, I'm learning how to teach other people and lead other people into authenticity and wholeness, that the whole thing you're supposed to do when you're like a minister or whatever. So I probably should click in to myself. And I was asking myself, what is it? And it was, you never gave yourself permission. I never gave myself permission to lean into those spots where I was feeling alive. So I said, all right, I'm going to fail greatly now. All right, so how do I do this? So I assumed the uniform, cut my hair, got Birkenstocks, got a whole bunch of flannel, and I was like, I'm doing this. And I ran into Orchid, and Orchid was ruinous, tempestuous, all the things that little Sunday school warned me about. And I said, I am utterly ruined. And when we had our first kiss, it all clicked. And I said, you know what? I think I'd rather be ruined ever since. Yeah, that's my story.
Our next storyteller is someone that we came across because he is an embodied stan. And we found that out on Twitter. And we have just been loving each other from afar on Twitter for, I think, about a year now. And I just met him in person an hour ago. So you've seen as much of him as I have, but I feel like I know his whole story, and I know y'all are going to love hearing from him. Coming up next to the stage is Reverend Solomon Missouri. He lives in Durham now, where he is the senior minister of Kyle's Temple AME Zion Church. Solomon Missouri, welcome to the stage.
How y'all doing? Y'all make me a little nervous. I'm gonna hang on to my phone. I remember the first time that I saw him. He had on this gray suit, tailored to perfection, these rimless glasses, polished shoes, a smile that could light up a room. He was the epitome of style, walking and talking and living, just exuding charisma. As a child, I was always mystified by ministers and preachers, being a preacher's kid. He was climbing the stairs of my father's study in a little country church in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We had watched him climb through the ranks, preaching revivals and special days. He was trusted by our lay leaders and bishops and all types of folks. He was on his way to be a pastoral success. But then I remember coming to one of the conference meetings and not seeing him there. I was looking for him because he was my favorite. Upon closing the meeting, the church leaders informed us that he was sick, but we were not to visit him. That was an odd instruction for me, even as a child. What was so different about this sickness that caused us not to be able to see him, to visit him, to extend sacrament to him? We're Christians, we extend the sacrament when someone is unwell. In the late 80s, there were commercials that talked about HIV and AIDS. We talked about it in school because Magic Johnson, but we were in West Alabama and nobody has AIDS in West Alabama. Nobody's gay in Tuscaloosa. In retrospect, I've been nurtured by gay people my entire life. I've been loved well by gay people my entire life. From the faithful ladies who happened to share a home, they were roommates, to the brothers who taught me how to sing. Growing up in the South, you may have known people were different, but nobody called that difference homosexuality. Nobody said, that's a gay person. Maybe it was our Southern gentility or passive-aggressive fence-making, but we acted like gay people didn't exist. These beautiful people who enriched our communities, how could they be different? Silence and shame became essential for survival in the highly churched deep South. But this time we could not avert our eyes. We could not turn away. This time we could not look. This time it affected someone that we loved. I remember the whispers, the somber faces, the looks that were exchanged, the people that attempted to talk around him as they were talking about him. Then I remember coming to the meetings, and every now and then they would tell us to pray, 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 pray. There would be whispers about T-cells and viral loads. As a child, I didn't know what they were talking about. It's T-cell. For the life of me, I couldn't rationale what sickness could be so bad that we couldn't be light and salt to him. Why couldn't we talk to him? What was wrong with him? What was the matter? Why wouldn't anybody tell me? What was the matter? Meeting after meeting, they would bring up his name and we would gossip about mysterious illness. He continued to diminish. I thought about him, how beautiful he was, and he was beautiful. He was charming and he was engaging. I thought about him. And I thought about what our silence was doing to him. I thought about all the miracles of the gospel and how Jesus was never afraid to touch the afflicted, but somehow we were afraid to touch this issue. Even as a child, I knew there was something wrong. I knew that what we were doing was wrong. I knew that God had not called us to shun nor silence. I knew that love didn't look like this. I was there when church ladies would come and care for each other after a death of a loved one. I was there when we would take up a special offering for somebody that had lost a job. I was there when we held each other through tears and pain. I know what our love looks like. I know what it feels like, and this was not our love. This was our shame. This was our fears wrapped in a bubble, pressed into a pill, slammed down our throats. This is what Christianity looked like without Christ. A few months later, I saw him for a final time. I remember how thin he had gotten. His face had become gray and rough, and he couldn't walk on his own, but he had courage. He did his best to he didn't sit in the back, he came to the front. While he's suffering, he had the audacity to smile. And the smile still lit up the whole room. That smile that publicly shamed us all. It shamed every person that lacked the courage to love him, shamed every person that lacked the courage to care for him. That smile shamed every person that lacked the compassion to educate themselves concerning this condition. That smile shamed every person who clung to a flawed reading of scripture that said that they could not touch and love and care for. 6 months passed and he died. We stood around his grave. And we gave one last show. You know how we give that show. How we say that he was so special to us and how he was so unique and how we loved him so. We gave him one last show. And from his grave, he shamed us. We stood around and told one final lie. What is purity culture? If not a broken set of ideas that we use to break other people. What is purity culture but the suggestion that the body is not honored by the divine, and that the only bodies that are glorified are the abstinent bodies, the straight bodies, the heteronormative bodies. Maybe purity culture is the culture that tells us that our theological construction only glorifies God through straightness and creedalism and essentialism. That our trans brothers and sisters cannot be loved of the divine. Maybe purity culture is an ideological framework that communicates who is worthy of love and care and respect and joy. Maybe purity culture says that you can be welcome if and only if you fit a thin sociological framework of the religiously rigid. Maybe purity culture is an expression of which bodies get to be loved and which souls deserve to be affirmed. But friends of the divine, I do not come from a community that necessitates shallow theological imaginations or a flimsy framework or the rigidness and regressiveness of thought. I come from a community that is curious, that is wondrous, that is lovely, that is gentle and compassionate. I come from a community that knows that when we have treated our bodies poorly and we have abused our queer siblings and we have abused those who have been impacted and affected, I come from a community that says when you've been wrong, turn around and get it right. What is purity culture? Culture that deserves to end. Amen.
Hello and welcome back to Purified. Angie K. Hong is a writer, speaker, and worship leader. I first encountered her work with a brilliant piece that she wrote in The Atlantic after the wake of the spa shootings. She loves to create transformative experiences through her company, Kinship Commons. She lives in Durham with her husband Harold, her 2 sons Hudson and Rowan, and her dog Miko. Angie, welcome to the stage.
Growing up, it was really important to my Korean immigrant parents that I become a really good American, that I have all the opportunities that they did not have coming from a war-torn and poverty-stricken existence. My little brother and I would fulfill their hopes and dreams to become good people, which meant being a good American. Around 13, I started to take my faith as a Christian more seriously. A part of that was to admit, confess your sins, to reform your ways, and the whole goal was to keep on becoming purified so that you could become holy and become good and become right. And I just thought this was a really good way to live. It's a really great combination. To be a good American and to be a good Christian was just like this really great goal in life. I had it all figured out. But as time went on, right, something just did not seem to add up. As much as I tried hard to achieve, try to be talented, try to be smart enough, try to be popular, all it took was a random encounter in the girls' bathroom when random cheerleaders would just corner me and throw racial slurs at me. Just flatten me down. Or when people ask me, "Where are you really from?" which is the worst question you can ever ask somebody like me, FYI. It just all were reminders that I did not fit in. I could not become a good American. There's something in the way. And at church, I would sing my heart out to God. I lead worship, so I would play my piano and sing. But inevitably, somebody would come up and pinch my cheeks after worship service, saying that I look like a China doll. Or when a great Christian leader on a mission trip made a sexual advance at me, I had no idea it was coming. So I just kept thinking, man, I'm trying to live this good life, and there's still all this bad stuff that keeps happening. And my friends, it was affecting friends that look like me too. So if this life was so good, why was it causing so much harm? I took these sort of existential questions because now my life was all up in ruins. So I took these questions with me to seminary. I really wanted to read the Bible very, very closely to understand what it said. And I really wanted to interrogate the dominant ways of thinking about spirituality and theology. Just something was not adding up. I really wanted to understand why. Words like exegesis and double particularity, Orientalism, ornamentalism, these are words that just started to bring me to life. Not only was I suffering alone, there were words to what I was experiencing. I finally had the words. And these words helped me because in March of 2021, a 21-year-old white male Christian walked into 2 different Atlanta spas, shot and killed 6 Asian women. I knew exactly what he meant when he said that he was suffering from a sexual addiction. I knew exactly what he meant when he said that he wanted to go in there and kill all the Asians. I had the words for that. So I wrote about it in an essay for The Atlantic. My editor and I were really shocked and stunned because at the time of its release, it was the 2nd most read article on the entire website. Not only that, my inbox became flooded with messages from women all around the world. They related to my story. Some of them were saying that they resonated with my story. Other people told me their story and named all the people that were involved. I wasn't really overwhelmed by these stories. I was overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of them. There were so many. I'm really thankful that nowadays it's becoming more and more normal to expose these sorts of spiritual abuses and religious trauma and all the harm. I'm really glad to know that leaders, harmful leaders, and people who propagate purity culture and all of its harmful effects, that they're being named. I'm grateful for that work. But I kept thinking back to my story and how lonely I felt, how I thought I was alone. I kept thinking back to the messages that I received from all these women with the twinge of loneliness in each message. And I thought back to the women in Atlanta, their coworkers, their families. Who could show up for us? So I started kind of looking around very casually to see if there were any resources out there to address this, who could really nuance it, who could involve words and healing that were specific. I looked around some more because I didn't find anything. I looked around some more, and finally I found one, just one, a workshop on the intersections of purity culture and women of color. In connecting with these two therapists who put on this workshop, I learned that they had barely advertised this workshop, and yet it had been fully booked in less than a week. It was so successful that it ignited their dreams on what else they could offer, if there were cohorts or communities or retreats even. And I thought, if my one essay made a difference for these people who wrote me messages, and if one workshop was that popular, what else could be done? What if there were a whole community of healers and advocates and educators who could talk about these nuances, who understood, who had these words to say and the hands to heal? And what if it were readily available and easily accessible so that I wouldn't have to one day do an internet search for weeks and weeks to try to find something? Finding them was enough for me to dream, to start dreaming. It was enough of a thread of hope. Hope for Asian bodies, for Black bodies, for Indigenous bodies, for Latinx bodies, for transnational bodies, for trans bodies. It's enough hope that is specific to us, that is for us, and that's given by us. Thanks.
Before I announce our next storyteller, as a delinquent Jew, I was largely unfamiliar with purity culture and all the ins and outs. I mean, not that delinquent Jews are having a lot of premarital sex or anything, but we are Jews after all. Thank you, one person. One person gets it. I have to say, it is the honor of my life to be granted access to worlds with which I'm unfamiliar. To have people open up their souls and bear their truths, whether I'm familiar with their worlds or not. And it is a great honor to be able to translate those life experiences that are being shared with me, translate them in ways that helps a person to share their own story in front of a group of people like you. Without further ado, are we ready for another storyteller? Yeah. So our next storyteller is Ashley Lumpkin. Ashley is a Georgia-raised and Carolina-based writer, editor, actor, and educator. They are the author of 5 poetry collections, including Genesis and I Hate You All Equally. Love that one. Above all else, Ashley considers themselves a teacher, poet, and friar of food. She is a lover of mathematics and language. And you know what? She loves you too. Let's give it up for Ashley Lumpkin.
So the first rule of purity culture is do not talk about sex. You can hint at it, you can talk around it, you can shroud it in euphemisms, but you cannot directly talk about sex with anyone who is not married. Which is interesting because in all of like the silence around sex, it also hypersexualizes everything. Be that like the bodies of children or even our experiences with God. So I remember once in a Sunday school class, there was an older woman who had been invited to our church to speak as a part of a conference, but Sunday school was like not a part of that conference and she'd not been given those instructions. And so there was one point at which she made this comparison between like the fatigue you might have of being under the influence of the Spirit being the same as the fatigue you might have after having an orgasm. And that's like a different story for a different day, but I remember that like everyone in the class like turned to face me and the only other unmarried girl in the class, and they were like staring, mouths open. And one of the church elders is like, "Mother, there are singles in the room," and she just started like apologizing because she like knew she had made this like fatal mistake of talking about sex when there were unmarried folks in the room. And it's always been interesting to me, like for this group of folks that like really cares about what you think about sex, they're really loose about what the messaging actually is. My older brother got the talk by accident. He walked in on my parents once, tragedy, and afterwards he told me and he told our little brother that Dad told him, you know, this is the most fun you're ever gonna have, but you gotta wait until you're married. And that was it. That was like the whole talk. But even that was something. My younger brother and I never got any kind of talk. I'm almost 40 now, and I have literally never had a conversation about sex with any member of that community, which is kind of like ridiculous and funny now. But what it means is that, you know, in middle and high school, that all of my body image issues had like some nice spiritual language to cover them up. It also meant that I made really unwise decisions with my body, and even into college made like, put myself in some really dangerous situations. And since I had no language for safe or healthy, it meant that I had like no capacity to talk about what was going on with me and my body and my sexuality. While at the same time, like being in college was also transformative, right? So I'm like unpacking my own faith and unpacking my identity and figuring out, oh snap, I might be queer. And like all of these things are happening. I'm having these really like eye-opening experiences. And then I have to go home for breaks, you know, be they winter breaks, summer breaks, and like put all of that back into a very small box. So here I am at home for one of those breaks, watching a movie with Mom and Dad when the worst thing possible happens. The main characters start making out. My mother, she's like shifting in her seat and coughing. My dad is like frantically searching for the remote control. And just as the clothes on the screen are coming off, my dad is able to like pause the movie and he's like, "Babe, did you have the talk with Ashmo?" And she's like, "No, I thought you were gonna handle that with the kids." And they're going back and forth, until finally I interject and I say, "Hey guys, I know it's a little late to be thinking about having the talk with me, but let's just do it now. What do you want to know?" I wish that I could tell you like what went through my mind in that moment, that I was like, filled with power and like I was gonna reclaim, my own identity right here in front of my parents. But really, I was just trying to get us through this awkward stage and into any other emotion. We didn't talk. After a few moments of me like watching them go through all the stages of grief, I just kind of like got up and walked out of the room. But every now and again, I think about that moment, and I wish that I hadn't have stopped them. I really, really want to know what they would have said. Thank you.
Coming up, we have our fifth and final storyteller of the evening, Ryan Clark. And Ryan is someone that we met at Embodied through the person that he is creating a documentary with, Nathan. And Nathan was a guest in the original Embodied Purity Culture show that inspired tonight's event. That Purity Culture show started so many conversations within our team, within folks who contributed their stories to that show, within folks who talked to us about what they had heard, and really felt like this was a topic they wanted to hear in connection with all of the things that Embodied is always trying to talk about: sex, body, relationships, all of the above. We were joking in our green room earlier with Ryan about him being the token white man of this evening, and so I just want to ask you about that. So we are thrilled to welcome Ryan as our final storyteller. Ryan Clark is a writer, speaker, and creator of things. He loves to talk about sex, organizational dysfunction, furniture design, and grief. He is the co-host of Touch Podcast. Ryan Clark, welcome to the stage.
When I was 15 years old, I was walking down the aisle of the First Baptist Church along with 20 other youth, holding my pledge card. My card where I promised to remain sexually pure, abstinent until marriage. And as the sweat trickled down my back, I prayed to Jesus, "Dear Lord, please take away my sexual desire. I am so horny. But I want to keep this promise, and I want to be a good guy." See, good guys didn't pressure girls into having sex. Good guys didn't bump and grind on the dance floor. We didn't drink, we didn't smoke, and we didn't masturbate very often. And so we filled our lives with Bible studies and church camps and retreats and mission trips, all to this end. There was this promise: if we didn't have sex until marriage, we would have the most amazing, wonderful sex lives that we could ever imagine. And of course, we could imagine. And of course, God did not take away my sexual desire. So when I went to college, I doubled down on the Jesus stuff. I became the worship leader. I led the retreats. We went to the Christian rock concerts, and I led the mission trips. I even met my wife on a mission trip. And she, like me, was a good girl. She had signed the purity pledge as well. And our courtship was so sweet. It was long distance, and so we wrote each other handwritten letters and mailed them through the mail with a stamp. And we talked on the phone when there was 10 cents a minute long distance. And when we decided to get engaged, we did marital counseling with not one, but 2 ministers. And we did the great big workbook, every page of it. Now, we were hot for each other. And we wanted to have sex, but only the right way. Because after all, I was a good guy. And if I could just hold on a few more months, I would be having the most amazing, wonderful, earth-shattering, wake up the neighbors, pornographic, swing it from the chandelier sex I could ever imagine. Well, our wedding was beautiful. Big steeple church. We had 9 bridesmaids. And as we left the reception, we were nervous and excited. In a few short moments, I would be seeing the things and tasting the bits. I could not wait. And our honeymoon was amazing, but it was weird. And we got naked, but the line that we had had before, it still existed. And when we tried to when I tried to kind of brush past that line, no matter how sweetly or how warmly I thought I was being, my wife's body, Cindy's body, tensed up. And so over the following weeks, her body kept tensing up. And I was like trying to think of everything that I could do or not do, and nothing was working. And those weeks turned into months. And that tensing of her body eventually turned into a full-blown recoil. And this sweet couple who had bumped into each other as we walked down the sidewalk, we were now avoiding bumping into each other in our own hallway. At night, as the sun started to set, this dark cloud would descend on our tiny basement apartment. It's like this tension would rise. And Cindy would start kind of avoiding me, and I would, of course, I was trying to be attentive and do whatever a good Christian husband was supposed to do. But it wasn't long until we were just sad. We were broken. It was not working. So we went to Christian marital counseling and left Christian marital counseling, and we found another counselor, and she had been to seminary, but she also had a statue of Buddha in the corner. Her name is Terry, and we went to Terry's office, and we sat down, and I sat clutching one side of the couch, and Cindy was clutching the opposite side of the couch, and Terry came in, and we were talking, telling a little bit about what was going on, and she said, I need to ask you something. Have you come here today to try to save your marriage? Or are you here to figure out how to end it? I could not look at my wife. But I had this sense that she was nodding her head. And so I started nodding my head. And I looked over, we were nodding our heads. Yes, we are here to save the marriage. So we talked some more, and then Terry kind of jumped in again, and she said, y'all, I think the two of you need a do-over. It's like somewhere in this thing, I can tell you have a lot of love for each other, but there's so much hurt, and you didn't learn what intimacy is. And we were nodding. Yeah, this is kind of making sense. And then she said, I wonder if you would consider taking sex off the table, at least temporarily. And we were still nodding, so I was still nodding. And I noticed Cindy was nodding even faster. And so I sped up and matched her. But inside, I was thinking, this is not what I signed up for. But we went home, and as evening drew near, our apartment was a little bit lighter. Like, there was a little bit of lightness between us. And so we went back to marriage counseling, and this time she said, would you guys mind sitting next to each other? And would you mind holding hands? And so we held hands, and I noticed Cindy leaned into me a little bit. But this session got pretty emotional, and at one point, Cindy cried out, I don't understand why he's trying to get me to have sex. Only bad guys do that. And I was like, bad guy? When the hell did I become a bad guy? Like our whole relationship was some kind of ruse to steal her virginity. No, I had done the time. I had done the work. I deserved my reward. That was many more counseling sessions. Because by making sex the reward for my good behavior, turned my wife's body into the object of that reward. It's like if I come home and I take out the trash and I put my dirty socks in the laundry and I do the dishes, I should get sexed. I'm a good boy. It's like I turn my wife into a machine. If I put in a quarter, out comes a vagina. And for Cindy, she had been expected, after having complete agency and autonomy over her body, she was expected literally overnight to give that all away. And she learned that any guy, even a good guy, could suddenly behave like a bad guy. So it took a lot of work, but eventually I had to give up on the idea that sex was my reward. But when I did, Cindy was finally able to relax around me. And then I had to find the words, how to communicate my deep love and affection for this woman who I truly adored with all my life. And we both had to relearn what intimacy was with our minds and with our bodies. I remember the two of us really had to work very hard. But eventually things started clicking. And we had to trust that the other person wasn't working some kind of angle. We had to believe deep down that we didn't have to be perfect to be good. I had to believe that God wasn't using Cindy to punish me. I had to believe that I wasn't going to be punished for being honest. So, 23 years of marriage later, I'm still learning that transactional relationships are toxic. That God is not mad at me for being horny. And that there really is something wonderful and magical and amazing about sex. But it's at the heart of letting yourself be known and truly knowing another person. Thank you.
When we first pitched the idea for this, someone who has a lot of experience with events was like, y'all are talking about purity culture on a Saturday night. Is anyone going to show up? And so thank you for being here, for taking that risk, for understanding the power of telling these stories and holding the space with all of us.
I'm really looking forward to nuancing this whole thing called purity culture. I think it's a subject matter that we've just barely scratched the surface, and I want us to go deeper.
Ready for another storyteller?